Okay, I admit it. I fell in love with this show. I mean, it started innocently enough. I just saw this comment on Reddit and I decided to give it a go. Then I watched it. It took me 2 weeks to recover. Anyway, here's what I think about it. Before getting into the nitty-gritty, I think it's appropriate to talk a little bit about the setting. The only thing that I want to mention is that it's easy to overlook it. It's kind of one of those things where you don't pay attention to it very much, but actually it's there to gel everything together. They managed to bring to life a time when life was simpler, that naivete of your young years with warm friendships and first loves. It's impossible not to find this innocence and optimism endearing, especially in contrast with our time, where more cynical and pragmatist views tend to prevail. The fencing angle of the show is so strongly written, it can stand on its own. You can very easily watch 25-21 just for the sport itself. The competitions are full of twists and turns, and they manage to surprise you, even though the story is being told as a recollection of events that have already happened. I very much enjoyed how much the show spends on the main character's training and progression. At the start, Hee-Do is going through a lengthy period of poor performance. Her high school deals her a great blow by terminating their fencing program. Koyurim, the athlete she admires the most and with whom Hee-Do dreams to share a healthy rivalry, turns out to downright despise her. Hee-Do's own mother refuses her transfer to another high school, so her entire fencing dream hangs by a thread. You get a sense that there's a mountain to climb here, and that you're in for the journey. You're on the edge of your seat when the matches are decided by a 1-point difference, and you can't help but share her joy as she overcomes all these obstacles and prevails in her matches. By far the strongest element in the drama. Sometimes it's very easy to forget that this show was set up with a traditional romance in mind. At least for me personally, the relationship between Hee-Do and Koyurim just blows the other one out of the water. The premise of their arc is a high point from a writing perspective. For Hee-Do, it's about burying the image of her hero and befriending the real Yurim, who is a flawed human being just like her. For Koyurim, it's virtually the same, only viewed from the other side of the symmetry line, tearing down this persona of a perfect athlete, learning to navigate defeats, and accepting Hee-Do as a friend and equal. At the beginning, Hee-Do idolizes the young champion, expecting her immediate approval. She finds it hard to accept Koyurim's indifference and hostility. Conversely, Koyurim sees her as a threat in the beginning and antagonizes her. Things come to a head when Koyurim contests the decision of the referee when things don't go her way. From there, as the pair start learning things about one another, a mutual understanding starts settling in. Hee-Do learns about Koyurim's family struggles and the hard decisions she has had to make in order to keep the fencing career going. On the other side, Koyurim accepts that she treated Hee-Do unfairly and is very remorseful about it. Their bond is deepened by the parallel struggles and experiences they face as athletes, allowing them to connect on a level that few others around them can truly understand. As the series progresses, you get the impression that the girls are somehow on the same team, despite competing with each other. When Yurim interrupts Hee-Do's press conference at the end of the show to declare that the honor of being rivals is mutual, that moment marks the end of their arc, and for me, it's the high point of the entire series. Characters are yet another strong point of the show. Each side character is dealing with their own issues and having genuine connections either amongst themselves or the main characters. They are more than the friend stereotype. For example, this guy's the smart one, this guy's the quirky, this guy's the rebellious, and so on. No, actually we're privy to their complex lives full of successes and downfalls and navigating these connections and bring them together. For example, it would be easy to just relegate Hee-Do's mother to the role of, well, a loving mother. Or even an unloving one. I mean, we've seen this done so many times. But this series just refuses to have a unidimensional character. Behind her tough exterior, Hee-Do's mother is deeply grieving the loss of her husband, carrying her sorrow in silence. She shields Hee-Do from this pain, believing her daughter isn't ready to bear the emotional weight. Only when Hee-Do has grown strong enough to handle it does she finally reveal the depth of her grief. That moment of vulnerability transforms the relationship, showing that her sternness was a form of protection, not indifference. The big name that's missing from the likable character list is obviously Baek Yi-Jin. I'm really struggling to buy into this guy's character. I don't know if this is a Korean drama trope, but I very much like the character that makes some mistakes. And isn't always perfect, always correct. It's also downright annoying how all of a sudden the entire story is forcibly bent around him. In theory he appears a strong lead, but if you look a little closer, below the surface, you noticed all sorts of inconsistencies. For example, his indefatigable humbleness makes zero sense after he lived a life of wealth and luxury. You spend your first 20 years, those formative years, going to the top schools, top universities. If you got all the money, the cars, the looks, the popularity. And after all that, you so seamlessly switch into this benevolent youth with infinite patience. Bookstore clerk, fish merchant, newspaper boy. He so readily does these jobs with only a whiff of sadness.
Where's your fucking rage? Your self-respect?
Yes, where is it? How can you accept so easily that everything was taken from you? Where are the mistakes? Where is the internal conflict? Because the show does make a point of pitting the world against him, but it's such a missed opportunity. It would have been so much interesting to see him overcome character faults such as arrogance or vanity that emerge naturally from an upbringing like his. Conversely, it would have been also interesting to see him use the confidence and authority that he gained in his younger years to his advantage when the situation required. For example, his confidence should have outshone the other candidates when he was interviewing for jobs. We saw glimpses of this when he snapped at that producer for forcing the athletes to do too many takes, which resulted in an injury. The other thing is that he's consistently right all the time. The show never portrays any of his choices as wrong. For example, when he publishes the scoop that Yurim has signed with the Russian agency, this could have been an interesting insight into his character. Will he or won't he advise his career at the expense of a friend, just like Hee-Do's mothers did in the past? Instead, we learn that he actually saved Yurim parents from the media. And why do the other characters accept his decisions to further his career as good or inspired, even though it hurts them? Case in point, we have the last scene of the show, where Hee-Do wishes him good luck and is sorry about their breakup. I wouldn't be. His sequence of decisions about the New York arc is at best him just yielding to his emotions, and at worst downright ruthlessly career-driven. I still don't understand how he claims this big love for Hee-Do, and then not only accepts this position in New York, but he actively pursues it. Like, what was the expectations here? The point I'm trying to make here is that every action he undertakes is never perceived by the surrounding characters as a mistake, even though it objectively hurts them. He's always right about everything, and everything he does has a very solid moral justification. What's very bizarre is that we already explored the careerist archetype with the mother, and the show subtly paints the trade-offs of choosing a career instead of focusing on loved ones. In fact, the show itself raises the question as the mother directly confronts her daughter about this. She literally asks her daughter, "How come he can get away with this, and I don't?" And there is just no answer to that. It's like having a cake and eating it. The last quarter of the show, which coincides with the beginning of their relationship, is a very strange experience. As soon as episode 13 hits, the first thing you'll notice is a drastic tone shift. The preceding light-hearted atmosphere gives way to this heavy, dark, wintry vibe. 5 seconds ago they were messing up the food during their beach trip. Now they're focusing on construction accidents, life-changing decisions, and to top everything off, the 9/11 terror attacks. It's so randomly abrupt, it's like a cold plunge of sorts. Somehow, in the midst of all these topics, Hee-Do and Baek Yi-Jin's romantic relationship is supposed to develop into something credible. I mean, if you count it, you get about 40 minutes of them actually being together, in a show that's over 20 hours long. It's unclear to me why their friendship evolves into a relationship at all. It's not easy to understand what the trigger is, or why it's being pulled by Hee-Do. What changed so that she is suddenly interested in going for a romantic relationship? It's unclear to me why their friendship evolves into a relationship at all. It's not easy to understand what the trigger is, or why it's being pulled by Hee-Do. What changed so that she is suddenly interested in going for a romantic relationship? I mean, we learned that he's interested, and at some point even confesses, but she seems to want to stay friends. I don't know why the change of heart. The whole 9/11 thing is... why? Just why? Probably the worst writing decision I've seen in a while. Nothing makes sense to me here. Why would this national news agency send the most junior of employees, let's not forget that he was doing the job for barely a year or so, to cover arguably the biggest news event in decades? Didn't they have someone with more experience? He's been in New York for about 6 months. The head reporter conveniently decides to retire. Again, we're in the middle of the biggest event of their lifetimes. And he nominates this inexperienced guy, visibly struggling with PTSD, as his successor. Remember, Baek Yi-Jin is only 25 here, and suddenly he's the head reporter in the US for this top news agency in Korea. Also, why are we spending 30 minutes rushing the audience into this horrifying world of terror attacks, which no matter how much of a godlike writer you are, you just cannot do in 30 minutes? The gravity of this topic is such that it needs more time. There's no other way to say it. The viewer cannot digest 9/11 in 30 minutes out of 20 hours. I get it. In life things happen suddenly sometimes. But as a show, you need to spend some time on it. Otherwise it will just feel contrived and simply cheap shock value. Finally, the cherry on top has to be the "I'm wearing clothes so I look good for you" line, said while standing in front of the smoldering buildings. I don't know what they were thinking with this. Has nobody in the writer room just went down to them and say like, look, this is probably not a good idea? Let's talk about the breakup a little bit, shall we? Can anyone tell me what the f*** are these characters thinking? Who are they? Isn't he supposed to be in love with her? Hasn't she helped him through his darkest times? Why would he want to go to New York at all? If he hated the suffering as he claims, why would he apply to be the main guy there? He could say, look, this is a career move for me, my career comes first. The problem is that he never really mentions this in episode 16 when they discuss at painful lengths the breakup. Never. He talks of trauma, he talks of how her support was burdensome to him. Again, if he's so career focused, why is he even trying to save the relationship when she does the sensible thing and breaks up? I mean, you signed up to be away forever from the person you're in love with. And when Hee-Do goes, I'm not really okay with this. No thanks. What even is the point? Like, what are you trying to save here? You've already chosen not to be with her. Against this backdrop, episode 16 spends another precious 30 minutes closing and reopening this topic, which honestly is pointless to me, the viewer. I get it. Can we move on? What tops off this depressing episode is how we found out that they barely see each other anymore as a group. Again, what's the logic behind this? We know that there were strong connections between them even before the show. Seung-wan was childhood friends with Jun, to whom Ko-Yerim is married, and Yerim and Hee-Do basically worked together until very recently. They would have to put in serious effort to avoid each other in order for them to be apart. Another inexplicable decision from the writers. You could have just said, look, and they lived as friends ever after. There was no indication, there was nothing in anyone's character that suggested that they would just split apart, that they would never be together anymore in a time span that's not that long, right? This isn't like 50 years later. Yeah, okay, life happened. We're talking about a few years during which, again, they work together. It's striking the fact that the writers went out of their way to break apart this friend group, to let us know that this friend group did not survive, which is much sadder than the breakup itself, because I was so much more invested in the friend group than I was in the main relationship. I can't help but wonder how much stronger this story could have been had they not wasted all this time on 9/11 and construction workers and this overdone breakup. And instead, we could have seen more of their actual relationship, more time spent together with the friends group. I guess if you're a fan of Baek Yi-Jin's material wealth, this is the show for you. In the end, he gains everything and is proven right about everything. If you haven't seen this drama yet, just do it. It's very tempting to advise you to watch until the end of episode 12 and then drop it. However, you'd be missing the real keystone of the show. Koyorim and Naedo's arc is being concluded over the last few episodes. I can't end this review without showing some love to the actors, who, let's just be honest, delivered this. Look, I'm not gonna say you won't find some of the acting a bit cheesy, but if you're looking through the lens of typical K-drama tropes, where this style is often intentional and part of the charm, you'll learn to ignore it. I would be remiss not to single out the magnificent Kim Tae-ri. It's very hard to point out what specifically she does that's so different from the other actors, but if you watch her performance across a few episodes, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's a certain something about her that gives her so much gravitas. You'll see it when she somehow makes even the cheesiest moments feel more grounded and authentic. You'll see it best perhaps in moments of vulnerability and pain. You'll even see it in her interviews outside of the role. In the end, 2521 has made it to the ever-shrinking list of shows that made me feel something. And for that, I think it's worth a watch.